you may have missed, or maybe you heard the stories and you just want a different angle. You want an angle from an African perspective. All those and more will be coming up after the news with Jwalane Tulongwepe, and then after her will be sports headlines with Fikile Lingwati.
SABC News, the African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. There are reports that 10 soldiers have been killed when fighters attacked a military camp in northern Mozambique. The attack was claimed by the Islamic State. A recent increase in militant violence comes as the French energy company Total is trying to resume its operations at a $20 billion gas project. Health officials in Sudan say a cholera outbreak in the capital Khartoum has killed 70 people in 2 days. A surge in infections comes after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, carried out drone strikes, which cut off water and electricity supplies across much of the city. Cholera outbreaks have become worse and more frequent since the war began over 2 years ago. The South African National Defence Force Chief General Rudzani Maphanya says that the SANDF is getting closer to the withdrawal of all their troops from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He spoke at the United Nations International Peacekeepers Day in Bloemfontein in the Free State Province. Tribute was also paid to the 14 soldiers who died in the eastern DRC earlier this year. Maphanya further says that they have reached a crucial point and are doing all they can to withdraw all SANDF personnel in the DRC.
As announced earlier this month, we are busy with the phased withdrawal of our forces from the Southern African Development Community Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which we call SAMI DRC. We are working around the clock with the SADC Secretariat to ensure that we get all our people and equipment back from the Eastern DRC. We are at the critical stage of this withdrawal.
The President of Botswana, Duma Boko, says a movement between Botswana and South Africa should be simplified to ensure no citizen from either side is punished for overstaying in either country. Duma addressed consultative meetings at the border villages of Ramotswa and Tlokweng on Wednesday. He says travellers, especially those from Botswana, continue to face a lot of challenges when entering or exiting South Africa.
Well, there are a number of issues really that stand out. The first is an issue regarding movement between South Africa and Botswana. There are many challenges there. People who come into South Africa for many reasons and end up overstaying even by a day lose the right to re-enter South Africa for at least 12 months. So these are some of the issues that we raised and we will look at and we've committed to dealing with. So these are some of the issues that we foreshadowed, but we will deal with more substantively at the binational and going forward.
The army chiefs of Cambodia and Thailand have agreed to ease border tensions after a clash in which a Cambodian soldier died. Both sides agreed to withdraw troops from the disputed part of their shared border. A Thai army spokesperson said a joint boundary committee would try to resolve the conflict. The BBC's Jonathan Head has the details.
The border was drawn up by French cartographers more than a century ago when France ruled Cambodia and threatened to expand into Thailand. There are anomalies in that border which have long caused friction and occasionally exchanges of gunfire and even artillery. In recent years, this friction has been accentuated by the bitter rivalry between Thai conservatives and the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, who has been accused of compromising Thailand's territorial claims to advance his own business interests and his friendship with the Cambodian ruling family.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News, the African perspective.
Good morning, guys. In our sports headline, Mamelodi Sundowns senior coach Steve Komphela believes the FIFA Club World Cup is an opportunity for the side to attract best players in the team. And the Czech Vondrousova beat Poland's Magdalena Frech to book a spot against the third-seeded American Jessica Pegula. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
As usual, let's go to our Africa Roundup now, where we get you in touch and in tune with what's been happening, looking at stories from yesterday and throwing forward into what we can expect in terms of developing news stories on this new day, this Friday, the 30th of May. We start with the African Development Bank Group, where CDE Old Ta has been elected as the president of the African Development Bank Group in Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire. The president-elect, who was backed by Mauritania, defeated 4 candidates, including South Africa's Majabulile Swazi Chabalala and Zambia's Samuel Maimbo. Ta will succeed the outgoing president, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, whose term ends in August. African Development Bank Secretary General Professor Vincent Nmiel has more.
The African Development Bank is one of the most democratic institutions in electing the president of an MDB. In most MDBs, very many, they are handpicked by their countries because their countries control the majority shareholding. But in the AFDB, it's a competition, and the governors select who they perceive to be the most suitable candidate through a voting process that lasts almost a year. I mean, almost 9 months of preparations. From July, the 1st July of a particular year, ending in May the following year, ensuring that the process is one that lives up to the expectation of the shareholders.
The Astana International Forum opened on Thursday in Kazakhstan with a high-level ceremony that set the stage for 2 days of strategic dialogue, cross-border collaboration. Now, this year's forum gathers global leaders to address some of the world's most urgent challenges under the theme Connecting Minds, Shaping the Future. Here's Rwanda's President Paul Kagame speaking at the forum.
Many developing countries remain trapped between rising debt, shrinking fiscal space, and harsh borrowing terms. There has been much talk of reforming the global financial architecture so that it is fit for purpose. But the problem we have is not just structural, it is political. The rules of the system are quite often enforced unequally.
Senegal has initiated a symbolic national dialogue which has brought together nearly 800 participants from various horizons in a climate marked by persistent political tensions. This framework of consultation, under the leadership of President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, aims to explore options to set up the democratic foundations of the country, emphasizing reconciliation and national unity. Amadou Kamara Gueye reports.
And many questions will be raised about how to reform the political system in Senegal, political parties, electoral vote, and also how to imply other political figure, meaning the opposition, and also influential figure in order to ease the political and the social context, which is very tense in Senegal since Diomaye and Sonko have taken the power, and Senegalese people start worrying, and people need to discuss as our tradition, meaning the dialogue, in order to ease the political and the social context, which is very tense.
The cholera vaccinations began this week in Jebel Awilia, the hardest hit locality in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. This is happening with the UN support and with the help of UN partners on the ground. Stefan Dujarric is the spokesperson for the Secretary General.
The World Health Organization has also delivered more than 22 metric tons of cholera and emergency health supplies to respond to local efforts. Cholera cases today are surging in Khartoum state, posing a grave threat to children. WHO attributed the spike to damaged water infrastructure, the movement of people, and the lack of safe water. On top of that, our partners are warning of mounting pressure on already overstretched health system in Khartoum. UNICEF, for its part, is implementing a multi-pronged cholera response in the Sudanese capital, focusing on high-risk communities and critical water infrastructure.
A South African mother and 2 accomplices were sentenced to life imprisonment for trafficking her then 6-year-old daughter in a case that gained nationwide attention since the child went missing last year.
Kelly Smith, her boyfriend, and their friend were convicted of kidnapping and trafficking the girl, Jocelyn Smith, after she disappeared from a small town in the Western Cape. In a trial that shocked the country, a witness said Kelly Smith told her she had sold her daughter to a traditional healer for $1,100 and the girl was desired for her eyes and skin. High Court Judge Nathan Erasmus, during the sentencing, said the fact Kelly Smith, her boyfriend Jacqueline Apolis, and their friend Stevino Van Ryn were drug users was no excuse. He said there was nothing redeeming he could find that meant the harshest sentence shouldn't be imposed. Jocelyn Smith has still not been found, despite an extensive police search, and police appealed for more information at the sentencing.
That's how we wrap this Friday's edition of Africa Roundup. And then coming up after a short break on Africa Rise and Shine, we look at stories making headlines in North Africa. This is where Peter will be speaking to Eliza Volkman, journalist in Tunisia, as they unpack what's happening there. Stay with us.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Now, it's time for a closer look at some of the big stories coming out of North Africa this week. From migrant crackdowns in Algeria to new diplomatic assignments over Western Sahara, and a major UK-Morocco energy project hitting regulatory roadblocks. And there's a lot unfolding across the region. Joining us now from Tunis is journalist Eliza Volkman, who closely monitors developments in North Africa and the Sahel. Eliza, always good to talk to you. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. Great to be back.
All right, so let's chat about, let's start in Algeria. Reports coming up there about crackdowns on migrants, including mass expulsions and troubling levels of hate speech. What do you make of the developments there? What do we know?
Things have been escalating over the past year, and it's causing very serious regional tensions. In the past month, Algeria has expelled over 4,000 migrants towards Niger and 5,500 migrants into Mali. And this is widening the tensions and the diplomatic gaps between Algeria and these two neighbouring Sahelian countries. This is just a recent snapshot. Niger, the tensions have been flowing between Niger and Algeria over the past year. They've expelled 31,000 people into northern Niger, which is one of the poorer countries in Africa. They've not got the infrastructure. And I've been following a story of a woman who's expelled from Tunisia into Algeria, into Asamaka, and that's really opened a real sort of window on the crisis in this tiny little border town in northern Niger. There's just buckling under the strain of these waves of sort of influxes of completely destitute migrants because they arrive pretty much with little more than the clothes they stand up in. And although there are NGOs there, they're really struggling to cope. But this is sort of symbolic of what's going on inside of Algeria. Algeria, it's the biggest country in Africa. It's got oil and gas wealth. But really under the Tebboune regime, it's become steadily more isolated. It's become internally, politically very, very fractured. It's traditionally sort of been a military state, but under Tebboun's aegis, he's imprisoned about 155 of the generals, and there are sort of growing fracture lines between different sort of political clans. Tebboune was the sort of initially like the regime's answer to the Hirak movement, which was a very powerful popular movement. There were mass marches. I think there were hundreds of thousands of people marching every Friday, and they said, "Okay, we'll call for elections." Bouteflika, who'd been the president for a very long time, stepped down, and people had hoped that the elections would lead to a bigger change, but instead, under Tebboune, things have become much more oppressive. He's cracked down on NGOs. So the crackdown on migrants is more a symbol of the fracture lines and fault lines within Algeria, and the instability. And it's also becoming increasingly politically and diplomatically more isolated in the region. And when there's political instability, where you have this sort of centralized presidential, sort of authoritarian regime, there's a sort of progressive crackdowns on different communities. So he's arrested pretty much all the Hirak movement leaders, dissolved civil society or arrested and imprisoned them. So it's reached a point where they're cracking down on the most vulnerable, and also people who are visibly different. It's a classic populist move to point the finger at people who are communities who are visibly different, who are outsiders, and to stir up hatred against.
I was actually about to ask the people that are being expelled, because there's always been racial tensions, particularly with non-Arab looking people in that region.
Yes, it's become significantly worse over the past years. Unfortunately there is a big cultural divide between the I'll say sort of inverted commas of Arabic Maghreb. People are, the majority of people's actual ethnicity in North Africa is indigenously African and from the Amazigh. But this is the sort of Arabic identity was sort of consolidated in the 60s with sort of pan-Arabicism and the sort of Arab nationalism that rose up and created leaders, particularly like Gaddafi, for example, and Nasser in Egypt. So these kinds of tensions have grown when there's instability, because that sort of baseline of Arab nationalism has never really gone away, and sadly, historically the truth is that with the this is going back into much older history with the Ottoman Empire and the Arabic and Barbary slave trades, that people from West Africa were traded as slaves, and there's not been the kind of reflections about those slave trades that perhaps the academic and popular conversations around the transatlantic slave trade that's been happening in the UK and America. Those old sort of those old stigmas sadly have remained unquestioned, and now across the region are rising to the fore again, very sadly.
So, the UK's former ambassador to Egypt recently advised British citizens against travelling there. Egypt, what's going on?
There's a sort of particular case of an Egyptian British national who has been imprisoned for quite a number of years. His family have been campaigning for really quite sort of very actively and lobbying Parliament, and currently his mother is actually on hunger strike, and they were actually on the Radio 4 Today programme, and his sister's very concerned for both his health and his mother's state of health, and fear that the mother may die. This is quite an unprecedented move, and certainly there's a sort of question. There are other regimes who hold British nationals or have very much a sort of authoritarian system, and so this is a very strong move by the former British ambassador. Sorry, I'm going to who has said very quite plainly that Egypt is a police state, and that there needs to be a change in the Foreign Office travel advice to stop, to advise British nationals away, to not visit Egypt on holiday. He where there was a Cambridge student who was tortured, and that there was one woman who was travelling with a lot of medicines who found herself imprisoned. So John Casson, the former ambassador, and normally ambassadors are very diplomatic, and he has said quite clearly, he says that Cairo's been fobbing us off. He's been refusing to release British national Alaa Abdel El Fattah, who's the gentleman in question, and he's been very outspoken about the Egyptian regime, and this is quite a bold move, because Egypt relies on tourism. It's one of its major incomes. However, Egypt is also allied in an axis the axis with Emirates that has a massive influence in North Africa and the Sahel. I mean, we're seeing, you talk about the Sudan war. Emirates is one of the major influences, with its partner Libya, in keeping the RSF going, even though they've been beaten back in Khartoum. So people are quite surprised that former Ambassador Casson has been so outspoken, and to voice such a strong message against a significant country in North Africa is quite unique.
Okay, let's go to Morocco. It looks like Côte d'Ivoire has become the latest country to support its autonomy plan for Western Sahara. What does this endorsement actually mean in diplomatic terms?
Yes, we're seeing progressively more and more countries getting behind the autonomy plan, which to date hasn't really transpired as being that autonomous for the Sahrawis. The Sahrawis would like complete independence from Morocco. But I think what we're seeing is a diplomatic and political shift. There's sort of tectonic shifts going on in Africa. And in a way, Morocco is politically and ideologically very different from countries like Algeria and Tunisia and Libya. But also we're seeing this UAE-backed disruption in the region. and Morocco sort of is it's advancing economically, it's also advancing technologically, and they have always been very much more open to trade. They're very advanced in banking and digital banking, and since sort of about 2015 to even go back to 2010, they've made a series of strong development policies that is very much an open door to business. They've really, built on their industrial sector, particularly around Tangier and those sort of free zones, where they sort of opened up the opportunity for international investment, offering tax breaks, various forms of security. So this is, in terms of sort of ideology in the region, Morocco is very much pro sort of free market, it's pro trade. It's got very stable ties to Europe, as we've seen. Even though this pipeline is on pause, there are also negotiations with the UK to ease access to visas and to make travel between Morocco and the UK much easier. So I think by backing Morocco and coming alongside, I think we're seeing a shift towards, I suppose, maybe not sort of creating a bloc, but maybe sort of consolidating that sort of ECOWAS bloc that is pro-trade, pro-investment, and has softer, more open ties to trading partners like Europe, UK, the Gulf, and the US, which would be, one would hope, would be profitable for countries like Côte d'Ivoire and Kenya, who have also backed this plan.
Are there any stories perhaps that we haven't looked at that you think we should be paying more attention to as we look forward?
I think we should be paying more attention to what's happening for migrants in Tunisia. I think there's traditionally been this sort of, I suppose, retelling of the sort of migrant story that it's all about crossing to Europe, and what we've seen in Algeria with these massive dumps, that actually there's a much bigger political and diplomatic story, and that it's becoming a very destabilizing force. And this is a sort of a downward push from Europe towards North Africa, and then North African states pushing migrants into other countries that's impacting the Sahel, which is very destabilized. And what's been happening in the past couple of weeks is that migrants in Tunisia have been organising demonstrations, and they're calling for international protection. They have quite a long list of demands, but they're really wanting to draw attention to the level of cruelty that they're experiencing, and that there is a complete absence of human rights. Over the past month, there have been more burnings and erasure of the camps. There's between sort of about the 19th kilometre north of Sfax, going forward sort of about another 20 kilometres north, there are a series of informal camps, and this used to be a sort of a transition zone where people would camp temporarily to get a smuggler's boat to Italy. But since the Italian and EU policy of paying particularly Libya and Tunisia to effectively guard their maritime frontier, we're seeing that migrants are blockaded inside Tunisia. They can't cross, and there are real problems in terms of trying to find repatriation, and there's a constant risk of arrest. I haven't got sort of exact figures of how many people are in prison, but we're seeing thousands of people being expelled. So that this is one to watch. It's just 700 marching, but
okay.
an excellent story to watch.
We always run out of time, unfortunately, but always grateful for your insights in the region. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. You. That's Alicia Falkman, who's a journalist in specializing in the North Africa and Sahel region, speaking to us about some of the stories playing out in that part of our continent. It's time for your news headlines. Here is Jwalani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines. There are reports that 10 soldiers have been killed when fighters attacked a military camp in northern Mozambique. The attack was claimed by the Islamic State. South Africa's Justice Minister Mamoloko Kubai says her department is committed to reviewing the country's parole laws as well as the Criminal Procedure Act. This after police revealed that 2 of the 3 suspects wanted in the connection of the murder of 30-year-old Olorato Mongale had been out on bail. And finally, the army chiefs of Cambodia and Thailand have agreed to ease border tensions after a clash in which a Cambodian soldier died. Both sides agreed to withdraw troops from the disputed part of their shared border. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now let's get a full sports bulletin. Here is Fikile Lingwati with the details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, guys. Thank you, Asanda. Let me start off with football news. Mamelodi Sundowns senior coach Steve Komphela believes the FIFA Club World Cup is another opportunity for the side to attract a different profile of players ahead of the 2025-2026 season. The reigning Betway Premiership title holders could also arrive at the newly expanded 32-team tournament in the USA as CAF Champions League winners should they defeat Pyramids on Sunday. Sundowns have been drawn alongside Ulsan HD of Korea, Germany's Borussia Dortmund, and Fluminense from Brazil in Group F. Komphela explained why their next assignment opens doors in the transfer market.
So when Mamelodi Sundowns goes out there, we're looking to go out there and sell an African product, showcase African excellence, so that we say this is how we play football in South Africa. Football is culture. So you go out there to show how we play. You can imagine you're going to play Fluminense and then you see them playing Route 1. You know what you're going to say? But these ones are not Brazilian. So what makes you African? What makes you Sundowns? What is it that you're going to leave the world with memories and remembrance of?
The former Kaizer Chiefs mentor emphasizes what Downs are already doing on the African continent.
They come here, you say we play in the northern teams, and you know what to expect from Al Ahly or Pyramids or Raja. So it's like that. Every region is an indication and the profile of how they play football. So we have to go sell our product as well. Go out there, just show that Sundowns can play. We are called Brazilians. Do we resemble that? If we have to play anything close to Fluminense, then it means we'll have to move from South Africa and go become real Brazilians, because that's what we say we are.
Côte d'Ivoire under-17 head coach Basiriki Diabate has admitted his side faces a daunting challenge at the FIFA Under-17 World Cup Qatar 2025 after being drawn into what he described as a difficult group. The Elephants will compete in Group F alongside Mexico, Korea Republic and Switzerland, a trio of teams representing 3 different continents and styles of play. The 2025 tournament will mark Côte d'Ivoire's return to the global under-17 stage with the expanded 48-team format offering a bigger platform for African youth talent. But for Diabate and his technical team, the blend of football cultures in their group means preparation must be precise. Let's end with tennis news. Czech Vondrousova, the French Open losing finalist in 2019, rallied past Poland's Magdalena Frech 6-love, 4-6 and 6-3, and next meets third-seeded American Jessica Pegula. Pegula, last year's US Open runner-up, beat 55th ranked fellow American Ann Lee 6-3, 7-6 and 7-3 tie in their second round match on court Philippe Chatrier. Vontrusova has been plagued by injuries and underwent shoulder surgery last year. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's time to take a first look at what's been happening on the business and economics front as we say good morning to Shanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. Former Mauritanian Finance Minister Sidi Ould Tah has been elected president of the African Development Bank, AFDB. This follows a poll during the bank's annual meeting in Ivory Coast. He'll replace Akinwumi Adesina, a Nigerian economist who will step down in September after completing the maximum 2 5-year terms in office. The AFDB, which has $318 billion in capital, is owned by 54 African states and non-regional nations, including the US, Japan, and Saudi Arabia. Its biggest shareholder is Nigeria. Millions across the African continent remain excluded from formal finance due to outdated credit assessment tools. Finance exclusion makes individuals and households more vulnerable to economic shocks such as job losses or crop failures, as they cannot access credit or savings to smooth consumption or manage risks. This is according to Steve Munyao, the director and founder at Africa Insights. Munyao was speaking on the sidelines of the second Africa Financial Inclusion Summit and Expo 2025 taking place in South Africa's Johannesburg.
What we have been having across sub-Saharan Africa, only like 43% of the population has access to formal financial services. So that means the rest don't have access. So they don't have a transaction account, they can't get other services from education, from medical. So financial inclusion, and especially because it targets the underserved, the unbanked. So if you put a kind of initiative in financial inclusion, it has a direct correlation with economic development, especially socio-economic development.
The South African Reserve Bank has decided to cut rates by 25 basis points, which takes the repo rate to 7.25% and the prime lending rate to 10.75%. The decision follows Statistics South Africa's announcement that inflation was recorded at a low 2.8% in April. During a media briefing in Pretoria, Reserve Bank Governor Lisitja Kganyago says the committee also considered a scenario with a 3% inflation target range for South Africa.
The MPC decided to reduce the policy rate by 25 basis points with effect from the 30th of May. 5 members favored this action, while 1 preferred a cut of 50 basis points. While the inflation outlook appears benign, we considered an adverse scenario which illustrates the upside risks. This was based on a global slowdown triggered by escalating trade tensions where the rand depreciates sharply.
South African Health Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi says he will not be deterred by court cases seeking to halt the implementation of the national health insurance in its current form. The minister was speaking during a colloquium held in Hyde Park, Johannesburg, by the Progressive Business Forum aimed at unpacking the NHI Act and the future of healthcare in the country. The department is currently facing 5 court battles, with the minister saying 3 more are expected. The act was signed into law a year ago, but not without criticism and litigation. More than $500,000 later in legal costs, the health minister says they will continue to defend it.
And when you look at the court challenges, each one of them mentions their areas of interest. One of them, it says, if this happens, I'm going to lose so much money. It's written in black and white in one of the affidavits. And because we are not yet in court, I'll spare you the details. But there is somewhere where they are saying, if NHI goes on, some doctors, some specialists are going to lose an income of 20 million rand per annum. So should I say yes? I'm sorry.
The White House says it will appeal against the decision of a federal U.S. court to block sweeping trade tariffs. The Court of International Trade ruled that President Donald Trump overstepped his authority when he imposed levies on imports from almost every country, causing turmoil on financial markets worldwide. The court said only Congress had the power to regulate international commerce. The BBC's Simon Jack reports.
The biggest issue is the uncertainty. I've spoken to American business leaders around the EU, and they say, look, we're in a situation, I can't plan anything. I can't open a factory, I can't make an acquisition, I can't do this because I don't know what my cost of goods sold is going to be from one day to the next. So I think that is the most corrosive part of it. But what will be interesting to see is whether other countries feel that some of the leverage that Donald Trump had over them has been slightly weakened.
Financial indicators at this hour: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 587. In Botswana, 13 pula 30. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 406. Zambia, 26 kwacha 62. BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is at 5 riel 67. In Russia, 78 rubles 61. India, 85 rupee 43. China, 7 yuan 19. South Africa, $1 is 17 rand 86 cents. $1 is 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,298. Platinum at $1,000.79. The price of Brent crude oil at $63.84 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Well, it's 6:44 Central African Time. Let's get into our G20 fact for this Friday, the 30th of May. South Africa will host approximately 130 working group meetings and 23 ministerial level meetings throughout the year, ahead of the country hosting the 2-day G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg from November 27. This marks the first time the summit is held in Africa under the theme Solidarity, Equality, Sustainability. And that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
The second edition of the South African MSME Access to Finance report has officially been launched by the African Bank in partnership with FinFind. Now, the report provides insights into the funding landscape for micro, small and medium enterprises in the country, highlighting the challenges and opportunities on both the demand and supply sides of finance. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabanga has more on the story.
Micro, small and medium enterprises or MSMEs are widely recognized as key drivers of job creation and inclusive growth in South Africa. But access to finance continues to be one of the biggest hurdles these businesses face. The newly launched South Africa MSME Access to Finance report, compiled by FinFind, an online platform that connects small businesses with lenders in partnership with African Bank, seeks to address this issue with hard data and actionable insights. African Bank Group CEO Kennedy Bungane says small businesses play a unique role in absorbing labor that may not be accommodated in traditional sectors.
When small businesses grow, they hire more employees. They create jobs. They create jobs for people who might not find employment in larger corporations, such as young people entering the workforce, such as people living in villages and away from central business districts where large corporates tend to gravitate. They contribute to reducing unemployment rates where others find it most difficult.
Darlene Menzies, CEO of FinFind, says the country's high unemployment rate underscores the urgency of investing in this sector.
Small businesses, MSMEs, are the only way that we're going to change the country. Government saturation as far as employment is concerned, corporate shedding jobs. And it's this market that's going to actually change the country and make sure that the high unemployment rate comes down. But the sector is not growing significantly at the moment. I think we all know we're preaching to the choir here.
According to the report, the smallest businesses are the most active job creators but remain the most underserved by funders.
Formal micro businesses with turnovers of less than R1 million are responsible for over 80% of the jobs created by MSMEs. They make up 85% of the funding need, yet they're the most underserved. And if we are serious about job creation, we must invest all our efforts into supporting these businesses to create jobs.
On a regional level, Gauteng still leads as South Africa's main business hub, though its dominance has declined slightly in recent years. The latest data shows encouraging growth in other provinces.
The spread of businesses across the country, you'll see that Gauteng maintains its position as the dominant business location, although there has been a decrease of 6.7% since 2018. Western Cape also decreased by 4.3%, but some nice information on some of the other provinces. And Mpumalanga increased by nearly 4%, KwaZulu-Natal by over 3%, the Eastern Cape by 2.2%, and the Northern Cape by 1.3%.
The report also examines the formal structure of businesses. Most operators, private companies with older closed corporations still represented among higher turnover entities.
PTY Limiteds are the dominant business registration, 88%. The thing to have a look at is if you see the second biggest registration, although it's not notable, is 5% is closed corps. And most of those are sitting in businesses with much higher turnovers, because in May 2011 is when registration stopped with CIPRO, which is now CIPSI. And so any of those closed corps that you're seeing are some of the more established businesses.
Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
South Africa's Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni, has once again underscored the urgent need to improve access to funding for small and medium enterprises. She made these remarks during a media briefing marking the countdown to the inaugural Global Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, or SME, ministerial meeting. This is set to take place in Johannesburg in July 2025. The event will be hosted by the South African government in partnership with the UN Small Business Agency. Channel Africa's business reporter, Innocent Simosa, has more.
In just under 2 months, South Africa will host the first ever global ministerial meeting on small and medium-sized enterprises in Johannesburg. Themed Navigating the Business Frontiers, the event marks a significant milestone for the continent. Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni, says it's a turning point for Africa's economic role on the world stage.
Today signifies a pivotal chapter for South Africa and our global commitment to small businesses. Every time I talk about small businesses, people want to go micro. I want to put it here that we are a portfolio responsible for both micro, small and medium enterprises.
Ministers from across the globe will gather to elevate the importance of small businesses in shaping a more inclusive and resilient global trade system just ahead of the G20 Leaders Summit later this year.
We've got to make sure that there's affordable infrastructure, there's affordable technologies, and the green industry presents that opportunity to ensure that the sector thrives and participate and not be left out in their own economies. Fourthly, is the issue of trade and market access. As global value chains are reconfigured with countries shifting towards heightened levels of trade protectionism.
Access to finance continues to be a key barrier for small medium enterprises. Minister Ndabeni says her department is committed to breaking down these barriers and unlocking real opportunities for entrepreneurs.
Our department, we are steadfast in our commitment to create a more enabling legislative and policy environment that empowers small businesses to grow, scale up, and compete on the global stage, because many people are complaining that we seem to be focusing only on early stage startups, and it is not true. We also have interventions that are targeting medium-owned businesses that foster sustainability.
Ms. Pamela Coke Hamilton, Executive Director of the International Trade Center, emphasizes that this meeting comes at a time of profound global shifts, ranging from trade policy realignments to rising sustainability standards that businesses must now navigate.
Comes at a time of major changes in global trade, from tariff-related policy shifts to the rise of digital technologies, changing the way we do business, to climate emergencies, forcing businesses to rethink operations. In this context, what we can say is this: when the winds shift, you have to anchor your ship. In times of uncertainty, we double down on what works. What works and what has been proven to work, as we've experienced firsthand over 6 decades, is equipping small businesses to navigate major changes.
As the world prepares for the G20 summit, the ministerial gathering in Johannesburg sets the stage for bold action. For South Africa and its partners, it's not just about policy, it's about empowering small businesses to thrive in a rapidly changing global economy. The countdown has begun. For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
A U.S. federal trade court has blocked U.S. President Donald Trump's global reciprocal trade tariffs from going into effect, ruling that Trump overstepped his authority. The 3-panel U.S. Court International Trade in Manhattan, New York, ruled that President overstepped his authority by imposing across-the-board tariffs on countries who had a trade deficit with the United States. The court ruled that the U.S. Constitution gave Congress the exclusive authority to regulate commerce with other countries, and this was not overridden by the president's emergency powers to protect the U.S. economy. Sherwin Bryce-Beast reports that some 12 Democratic states asked the court to halt Trump's so-called Liberation Day tariffs.
It's just the latest twist in the reciprocal tariffs announced by President Trump with great fanfare on April 2nd. The 3-judge panel ruled that Trump overstepped his powers granted by the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, after signing an executive order invoking its authority to address the country's trade deficits as an unusual and extraordinary threat to national security and the economy of the United States. The court said Trump's executive order exceeded any authority granted the president to regulate imports by means of tariffs. The court also ruled that the trade deficit issue did not meet the law's requirement that an emergency be triggered only by an unusual and extraordinary threat, which in the court's view, the trade deficits did not represent.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day.
Tariffs, or the threat thereof, have been a signature economic and political tool of the Trump administration, as Vladimir Tyshelnikov of the University of Sydney School of Economics explained.
He built a big part of his electoral campaign based on tariffs, and he did introduce tariffs. Now tariffs were overruled, and I suspect that politically he can now blame the court for the failure of this policy. So I am not sure whether it will be a major blow to his political standing and to his support. It is very hard to predict what will happen and what happens if, for example, the administration chooses not to comply with the ruling of the court. We have seen tension between court rulings and the current administration in the past. So it is, again, uncharted waters, very hard to tell what is happening. But at least this round, the administration and Donald Trump did not win.
The court's ruling effectively blocks the imposition of 30% tariffs on China and 25% tariffs on certain goods from Mexico and Canada, and the 10% universal tariff imposed on most countries around the world, including South Africa. The Department of Justice has already indicated its intention to appeal the ruling. Economist Tim Harcourt.
It might give us an opportunity to, end the trade war that is ongoing with the US and China and EU and so on. On the other hand, the courts interfering in the process can be provocative to President Trump. As much as I don't like tariffs and want to see them gone, the sort of legal interference in the elected president of the day, I think can backfire. So I'm a little bit worried about it, even though obviously I'd prefer there not to be tariffs.
President Trump also used the IEEPA to impose duties on goods from Mexico, Canada and China over allegations of fentanyl cross-border smuggling. But the court found that there was no link between efforts to cut international drug trafficking and charging duties on legal imports.
It definitely creates some certainty in the future, and industries and countries that were not subject to tariffs or not subject to high tariffs, they can sleep a little bit better tonight, and markets, they do react negatively when uncertainty increases and vice versa. So from this point of view, maybe it is not only about the economic effect of tariffs, but it is also about the rules that the US and the rest of the world are playing are established more firmly. We have more understanding of what to expect from tomorrow.
China, that has been engaged in a damaging trade war with the USA, urged Washington to heed rational voices of the international community and abolish its unilateral tariffs. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning.
On the issue of tariffs, China has made clear its position many times. There are no winners in tariff wars or trade wars. Pursuing protectionism and damaging the interests of all parties will ultimately be unpopular.
The three judges on the panel, appointed by Presidents Reagan, Obama, and Trump. And while the markets were buoyed by the court's ruling, the White House expressed confidence that it would prevail on appeal. A spokesperson arguing that the trade deficits that countries had with the United States created a national emergency that had decimated American communities, left workers behind, and weakened the country's defense industrial base. Facts it said the court did not dispute. The statement said it was not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency. The court also ruled that the Trump administration must issue new orders reflecting the permanent injunction within 10 days. I'm Shervin Bryce-Pease in New York.
All right, then, that's where we end this hour of Africa Rise and Shine, going into the second and the next hour of the show. We're going to be looking at a few things in this one, talking about the DRC, Joseph Kabila, having visited the country and the talks that he's hosting, speaking to religious leaders first, and he plans to speak to women and youth. We wonder what the agenda is going to be. We also look at Gaza and aid, food aid there, and how that's becoming a dire situation. People being killed just because they are starving and wanting to get access to food. But of course, you can imagine the stampedes that were happening there, and the staff members just opening fire on people trying to get food.
Yes, indeed. All that and more still to come. But first, here's the news with Jalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. There are reports that 10 soldiers have been killed when fighters attacked a military camp in northern Mozambique. The attack was claimed by the Islamic State. A recent increase in militant violence comes as the French energy company Total is trying to resume its operations at a $20 billion gas project. Health officials in Sudan say a cholera outbreak in the capital, Khartoum, has killed 70 people in 2 days. A surge in infections comes after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, carried out drone strikes which cut off water and electricity supplies across much of the city. Cholera outbreaks have become worse and more frequent since the war began over 2 years ago. South Africa's Justice Minister Mamoloko Kubai says her department is committed to reviewing the country's parole laws as well as the Criminal Procedure Act. This after police revealed that 2 of the 3 suspects wanted in connection with the murder of 30-year-old Olerato Mongale had been out on bail. Mongale's body was discovered on Sunday in Lombardy in the north of Johannesburg, about 2 hours after she was reported missing, having gone on a date. The 2 suspects were arrested last month on charges of kidnapping and robbery. This has highlighted concerns to better protect ordinary South Africans. Kubai says the Justice Department is working on ways to protect society without violating the rights of the accused.
As the Justice Cluster, we have agreed that we are going to review our processes. We are going to look at where the gaps are. Today, fortunately, we had a Justice Cluster meeting, what we call JCPS. One of the items was to look at the parole. How far are we in terms of reviewing the parole and also the Criminal Procedure Act that we are responsible for? So both the Department of Correctional Services and Department of Justice having to review that. There are interim measures that the Minister has committed that is going to put in place to assist in terms of responding to this, where there's high crimes.
South Africa's National Defence Force Chief General Rudzani Maphanya says that the SANDF is getting closer to the withdrawal of all their troops from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He spoke at the United Nations International Peacekeepers Day in Bloemfontein in the Free State Province. Tribute was also paid to the 14 soldiers who died in the eastern DRC earlier this year. Maphanya further says that they have reached a crucial point and are doing all they can to withdraw all SANDF personnel in the DRC.
As announced earlier this month, we are busy with the phased withdrawal of our forces from the Southern African Development Community Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which we call SAMI DRC. We are working around the clock with the SADC Secretariat to ensure that we get all our people and equipment back from the Eastern DRC. We are at the critical stage of this withdrawal.
The army chiefs of Cambodia and Thailand have agreed to ease border tensions after a clash in which a Cambodian soldier died. Both sides agreed to withdraw troops from the disputed part of their shared border. A Thai army spokesperson said a joint boundary committee would try to resolve the conflict. The BBC's Jonathan Head has the story.
The border was drawn up by French cartographers more than a century ago when France ruled Cambodia and threatened to expand into Thailand. There are anomalies in that border which have long caused friction and occasionally exchanges of gunfire and even artillery. In recent years, this friction has been accentuated by the bitter rivalry between Thai conservatives and the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, who has been accused of compromising Thailand's territorial claims to advance his own business interests and his friendship with the Cambodian ruling family.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And in our sports headline, Bafana coach has named his final 23-man squad for next month's 2 international friendly matches. And Yannick Sinner ended the retiring Richard Gasquet's career with a one-sided victory at the French Open. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
South Africa's Reserve Bank, the SARB, has cut interest rates by 25 basis points. That's 0.25% on Thursday, bringing the country's prime lending rate now to 10.75%. The announcement came as economic growth for the first 3 months of this year expected to have disappointed, whilst unemployment has increased. Dimakatso Lishuro has the details.
In a cautious move, the Reserve Bank cut interest rates by 0.25%, with only one member of the deciding panel, the Monetary Policy Committee, advocating for a 50 basis point cut. The reduction in interest rates comes amid increased uncertainty that's expected to have a negative impact on global growth.
I had come to the conclusion, the one thing that is certain is that uncertainty is here with us. That is the one certainty we have.
Announcing the first cut in interest rates for this year, Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago slashed South Africa's growth forecast to 1.2%, below the National Treasury projection of 1.4%. He says while global economic conditions are volatile, Africa's most developed economy has its own idiosyncratic characteristics weighing on growth.
We do not yet have the official data for growth in the first quarter. However, the indicators for sectors like mining and manufacturing have been disappointing, and unemployment has risen. In our last meeting, we warned of downside risks to our growth forecasts. We have now trimmed our GDP projections and expect growth of 1.2% this year, rising to 1.8% by 2027.
First National Bank welcomed the cut in interest rates, saying there may be another cut once more this year. Esther Ush is product head at FNB Integrated Advice.
That will have a knock-on effect in two areas of your life. The first being is if you have any debt, you're going to be paying slightly less for this debt. What we do suggest is that if you can, try and pay the previous amount so that you can pay that debt off quicker. Another thing that you do need to be cognizant of is this will also reduce the amount of interest that you are earning on some of your cash investments. So just be aware, if you are relying on that you need to just adapt your income numbers there.
Tariffs on imports into the United States are the main drag to global growth.
The combination of higher trade barriers plus elevated uncertainty is likely to weaken the world economy. We have therefore lowered our global growth projections. Prospects for global inflation are more complex. The United States could experience higher inflation from tariffs and supply chain disruptions. Those supply chain problems could also raise prices in other economies.
The central bank expects inflation to remain at the bottom of its inflationary target range of 3% for the year, saying the lower oil price and stronger rand against the US dollar will help offset the fuel levy announced by the finance minister last week.
We have revised down our inflation forecasts. This reflects the lower starting point as well as a stronger exchange rate assumption and lower world oil prices. These factors offset pressure on fuel costs from the higher fuel levy announced in the budget. In addition, our previous forecast included VAT increases, which have since been cancelled.
Kganyago says the SARB is working to review its inflation target. He says most central banks have lowered their targets, adding that South Africa's inflation target of between 3 and 6% was too high and too wide.
For some years now, internal and external analysis has shown that our inflation target is too high and too wide. The National Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank have engaged extensively on this issue, and technical work is at an advanced stage. Now that inflation has slowed, we have a chance to lock in lower inflation at low cost. This scenario illustrates that opportunity.
The bank's quarterly projection model shows a lower path for interest rates. Both the baseline and 3% scenario have a cut in this quarter.
Sometimes the narrative that had been dominant had been that if you are to achieve a lower inflation rate consistent with a lower target, you are going to need higher interest rates. This argument just baffles me. I cannot think of any country that targets a 2% inflation that has got interest rates like the ones we are having. They are having lower interest rates. Even the countries that are targeting 3% are having lower interest rates. Let's get the drift. The higher the inflation, the higher the interest rates are going to be needed to deal with that high inflation.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakatso Leshoro in Johannesburg.
Democratic Republic of Congo's former president Joseph Kabila held a meeting on Thursday with religious leaders in Goma, marking his first public appearance since arriving in the city after months away. The meeting took place at his official residence in Kinyogote, located in the Lac Vert neighborhood. Kabila aims to engage with the local population, starting with religious groups and planning to consult youth, women and civil society. For more on this, we're joined by our correspondent in the DRC city of Goma, Jimmy Shukrani Bakomera. Jimmy, how are you this Friday?
How are you? I'm okay.
Great. Thanks so much for catching us up on this as usual. What's the mood like in Goma since the arrival of Joseph Kabila after his first public appearance there in a few months?
Yes, is the first meeting. Is the first meeting since he arrives in Goma, and this occurs a movement like maybe the situation in Goma is gonna change because. Firstly, he began the consultation with this meeting with the representative of all religious domination in the city of Goma. So this occurred something like a movement that maybe there is something in a bit war which is going to happen in the city because the consultation or those meetings are going to keep on even at other social caches. So this, according to the people, they understand that the things are very serious because some of Goma residents, when they are afraid that Joseph Kabila is in Goma, they didn't believe because since he arrives in Goma is the first meeting which he held, and he accepted even the press, the press to be present where he is and to take some pictures, even if he didn't want to talk to press, but he accepted that press take a picture and to show the public that he is in Goma. So it is something like changement according to people, and they can believe right now that Joseph Kabila is going to make some changement, as he told in his speech, which I held last Friday. They understand that there is something which is going to be done, and their trust may be to the resolution of the conflict in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Why did he meet with religious leaders first? What kind of power are they seeming to yield in this situation in Goma?
You know, since 2001 until 2018, where Joseph Kabila was president of the DRC, he always made some consultation with religious, because according to him, religions leaders are persons which are in contact with all residents, because the churches here in Goma, they have a large of numbers of people which they can contribute just to build everlasting peace. So he chose Beda to meet religious leaders in order to make sure that he understands everyone, because those they are representative of many people. So religious they constitute a large number to build a great peace and to show the opinion according to what they are leading. So, and it's not the first time, because even if when he was a president, he always tried to meet religious leaders in order to understand them and to discuss about the peace. And you remember that last time the member of the religion, which they are Catholic, and Christ's churches, which they are known like Senko, they were in Goma. They discussed it with the IFM 23 leaders in order to restore peace. So it was the first time And it's more important for Joseph Kabila to meet firstly religious leaders in order to understand them and to keep on with consultation.
I know you say with your conversations with those on the ground, people are saying they seem quite hopeful that Kabila is in the country, that there might be a solution since he's there. But what are the major concerns that the people on the ground are hoping that Kabila will touch on as it pertains to their stability, their security? And does he have an alignment or a more understanding of the grassroots level of what needs to happen?
What people are expected to Joseph Kabila is to put end to this conflict, because it was for a long time this conflict held, and many people have lost their lives in this conflict. So people, they are wait only the end of this conflict, and Joseph Kabila promised them that this is the first step just to restore peace. And people like a president, the former president who led this country about 80 years, they are waiting to the solution, because those members, representative of religions, them also, they was been satisfied in this discussion, because some of them we're talking with them when they finished this consultation. They said that they believe that we, according to the experience of the former president, maybe this is gonna be the first step of changement, the first step of putting in end this consultation, because when I try to talk with people here in Goma, they said since many years we are in the war, so we want this to be ended. But at least Kinshasa keep on just to characterize Joseph Kabila like a great supporter of M23, even if he didn't confirm that he in a partners which he have with M23, but until now Kinshasa keep on to judge him like a source of insecurity, since Felix Tshisekedi arrived at the head of state. They judge him like a great supporter of the M23. But here, people, they believe that maybe just Kabila is gonna be the solution of the conflict, which has been recorded around the recovery in this part of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Could Kabila's consultations and meetings have some kind of interference or even jeopardize Washington's plans for a peace deal between the DRC and Rwanda?
We don't know, because he didn't give many explications, or he didn't explain more about those consultations. Those many between maybe Congo, Rwanda, and also he didn't talk many about this. But when he was in this consultation, he told the people, those representative of religions, that the country needs to rebuild the diplomacy with the other countries of the Great Lakes and in the Eastern African community and other countries. So he in a brief, he promised that he is going maybe to do this to rebuild the diplomacy between the DRC and other countries.
Right.
He didn't talk much, according to Washington.
Okay.
And Rwanda, because as you know, it's the conflict. Yeah, he didn't talk
remains to be
about
seen
this.
then in terms of what transpires in the next coming days or even weeks. We don't know how long he's there for, or how long he might even end up extending his stay based on whatever the original amount of time he had allocated to be in Goma. But thanks again, and we'll catch up with you again in the next coming days, Jimmy. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Jimmy Shukrani Bakomera talking to us live from Goma in the DRC. He is our correspondent there.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Révérend Docteur Alain.
Je suis content, très heureux d'être de la partie ce soir et bonjour à tous nos auditeurs.
Je rappelle que pour les intimes, il vous appelle bien sûr BMB. Aujourd'hui, nous parlons courage sur Mix Vibration. Comment définissez-vous le terme courageux?
Ça vient du latin cor, qui veut tout simplement exprimer la bravoure, la force de l'âme ou encore la virilité, le héroïsme que quelqu'un peut avoir en face de difficultés, en face de problèmes, en face de défis.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week, bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Around 55 Palestinians were killed in Israeli strikes on Thursday in Gaza. The bombardments come amid chaos surrounding the distribution of humanitarian aid. Humanitarian needs in Gaza have spiraled out of control, according to the UN World Food Programme. This after hordes of people broke into food supply facilities this week in search of food. According to a new Oxfam analysis report, this week marked 600 days since Israel has been saying it's targeting Hamas, but it is civilians who have been corralled, bombed, and killed. To speak to us about these issues, we're joined on the line by an expert in international law, Professor Andre Thomasausen from the University of South Africa. Professor Thomasausen, thank you for joining us on Africa Rise and Shine. How are you?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, listeners.
We appreciate you making time for us. So from what you can tell, Professor, is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or the GHF, which is backed by the US and Israel, handling the distribution of food properly?
Well, what we are witnessing is a complete breakdown of any communal organization. There is anarchy. And I've said since the beginning of this conflict that the United Nations should have appointed a peacekeeping mission, moved several thousand international soldiers in various brigades under blue helmets into Gaza, stop the complete collapse that we are now seeing, where an orderly distribution of aid is simply not possible anymore. Any truck that enters into a zone that has no more government, no more authority, will get stopped. The drivers will be dragged out, and they're lucky if they survive it. And the truck will be looted. And the looters, in most cases, are not distributing the food. They are going to hoard it, to sell it. And in many cases, they're even exporting the aid from the Gaza Strip into neighboring countries where it is being sold. So we are seeing a deplorable situation.
Are the newly created aid distribution centers by the GHF even accessible to the majority of people that need food?
When you have chaos, you can't talk about accessibility. You would have to arm the food distributors, and they would have to be told to shoot into the crowds to make way for the people that actually would like to get some food. So it's anarchy, and it is a complete breakdown of law, of course, and we see it not just in Gaza, we see it in many places in the world. The conflict in Sudan has cost at least 10 times more lives than the conflict in Gaza, and virtually nobody, not even the media, talks about it.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, it's an Israeli-backed aid that's given. However, Israeli troops fired on people desperate for food, breaking into food supply facility or into the crowd of people, some of whom had walked 10 kilometers, according to media reports, just to even reach something to eat. So is Israel really concerned about food aid and the starving Palestinians, or this aid setup is some cover-up for the suffering caused upon Palestinians, in your thoughts?
I don't see any evidence of any devious action here. It is simply already a year ago The U.S. distribution of food by USAID was done by air. They dropped it with small parachutes, but then people complained that sometimes people got hit by the falling goods. So if you have a situation like this, you can only, it is like a post-war situation, you can only try and restore law and order. Hamas is no longer a government. It's no longer an administration. The only thing they're doing is they're still holding on to and hiding the possibly 25 surviving hostages and possibly the corpses of many others that have died. And by doing that, they are continuing the act of aggression on Israel. So it gives Israel the legal reasoning that the conflict is continuing and they're entitled to continue to use force until the hostages are freed. This is it's just a deplorable situation where the United Nations has failed completely. The UN Secretary General that we currently have is probably the worst that the UN has ever had. The UN was designed to exactly prevent things like this happening, and instead we see them flaring up everywhere in the world. We have a tragic terrorist attack between Pakistan and India, and India proceeds to cut off the water, to stop the flow of a very, very big river and cut off the water to millions of people. These things, according to the United Nations, should not happen. In the United Nations Charter, it is forbidden to threaten with the use of force or to use force other than to protect yourself against an imminent danger. So we see this decline. Now, I still believe the only solution to save lives in Gaza would be an international peacekeeping operation, like we've had it in many, many places. We've had it in Korea after World War II, and South Africa was even an active part of the peacekeeping mission in Korea. We've had it very successfully in Mozambique, where over 1 million people were threatened by civil war, and the United Nations managed to end it in 1992 and then conduct, under their supervision, successful elections in 1994. There is a point where the people immediately involved in a conflict, in this case Hamas and Israel, are not able to manage the situation anymore.
This announcement of 22 new settlements in the West Bank meant for Palestinians currently living there, what does this mean for them, in your view?
I don't think that principles and ideas of justice and ideas of what is right or wrong can end conflicts like that. Conflicts can only be ended by intervention. It is probably not very wise of Israel to now encroach on the West Bank territory, which is under the Palestinian government. There's a Palestinian Authority, which is actually the only existing Palestinian government. They should be allowed to address this situation. But yes, there is also a need to help and protect refugees from Gaza. If people say Gaza is not a place where I can survive with my family, I have to move somewhere else, then it is the duty of the neighboring states to create refugee camps and to receive the refugees. In previous conflicts between Israel and Gaza, Jordan has received, I believe, about 2 million refugees from Palestine, and most of them are still living in Jordan. So it's something that the region, there's a regional organization, the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, they should begin to discuss. It is a humanitarian issue. Of course, people that have lost everything and cannot find food need to find shelter somewhere.
Thanks so much, Professor Tom. I don't know what happened to my mic there. Professor Tom Hausen, thank you so much for your time, and do have a great weekend.
Thank you. And all the best to you and the listeners.
Thanks. That's Professor Andre Thomashuizen from the University of South Africa. He's an expert in international law, talking to us about the situation in Gaza there, where humanitarian needs have really spiraled out of control, according to the UN World Food Programme. Still to come on Africa Rise and Shine, we find out what's happening in the world of sports with Fikile Lingwati, South Africa's national football team, Bafana Bafana's coach, naming his final squad. What is it for? When is it for? He'll tell us later. But right now, let's get our news headlines with Jolane Mwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, there are reports that 10 soldiers have been killed when fighters attacked a military camp in northern Mozambique. The attack was claimed by the Islamic State. Police Commissioner in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, says that the police have arrested 2 suspects that were with Philangenkosi Makhanya, who was the main suspect in the murder case of Olorato Mongale. The 2 suspects who were arrested were not part of the initial murder case. And finally, the UN's top official responsible for humanitarian aid has said that the people of Gaza are being subjected to forced starvation by Israel. Tom Fletcher again called on the international community to prevent genocide in Gaza. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Well, let's get that sports update now as we say good morning once again to Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. We kick off with football news. Bafana Bafana coach Hugo Broos has named his final 23-man squad for next month's 2 international friendly matches against Tanzania in Limpopo and Mozambique in Polokwane and Pretoria. The Belgian says his highlight since being appointed to the position was a team success at the 2024 Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Ivory Coast, where Bafana won a bronze medal. Broos says he will use the 2 friendlies to give youngsters an opportunity to show if they are ready to make the step up to the senior national team, with an eye on the future as most of the regulars in his squad are nearing retirement age.
It's a very good opportunity now. It's not really a game qualify for World Cup or qualify for AFCON. If you lose that game, it's a disaster. So now, if we lose even those 2 games, we will not be happy because we want to win it. But what's the problem? So they have the opportunity to play. And there are guys from 19, from 20 years old. Maybe they are not ready. But that we will see in those games. And therefore those games are so good for them that they can show it without pressure.
None of the Mamelodi Sundowns players have been included because of the team will participate in the FIFA Club World Cup in the United States from the 14th of June. Broos says Tanzania and Mozambique will provide sufficient opposition. He didn't want to play a stronger team such as Morocco because most of his regulars weren't available.
Playing against top teams, you have to do it with your best team. And not with, like now, all the players of Sundowns are not there. You have a lot of young players in. We had a call from Morocco to play against Morocco. Immediately I said no, because I don't want to have a game like France. And nobody understands if you play against Morocco and you have a big defeat. Everybody is angry.
Côte d'Ivoire under-17 head coach Basiriki Diabate has admitted his side faces a daunting challenge at the FIFA Under-17 World Cup Qatar 2025 after being drawn into what he described as a difficult group. The Elephants will compete in Group F alongside Mexico, Korea Republic and Switzerland, a trio of teams representing 3 different continents and styles of play. The 2025 tournament will mark Côte d'Ivoire's return to the global Under-17 stage with the expanded 48-team format offering a bigger and a better play in the platform for African youth talent. The Elephants qualified for the global finals through a strong performance at the Total Energies Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations earlier this year. And now in golf news, former champion Kim A-Lim fired a 6 birdies in a 4-under par 68 to headline a group of 6 players tied atop a long-jammed leaderboard after the first round of the 80th U.S. Women's Open. Fellow South Korean Im Jin-hee, Japan's Ryo Takeda, Americans Yali Mino and Angel Yin, a Spanish LPGA rookie Julia Lopez Ramirez shared the lead, one stroke in front of a group of 5 players tied on 3-under par 69. Let's end with golf news. Now it's tennis news. World number 1, Italy's Jannik Sinner advanced to the 3rd round of the French Open tennis tournament at Roland Garros in Paris. Sinner defeated Frenchman Richard Gasquet in straight sets, effectively bringing the curtain down on Gasquet's 23-year career. The reigning Australian Open champion sealed 6-3, 6-love and 6-4 victory after just under 2 hours on court. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwadi.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. It's Channel Africa's birthday month. Happy birthday! Celebrate Africa's voice with us. Catch us on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802 and Satellite Channel PAS10.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business. Now here is Chanduko Lugege with the economics news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Former Mauritanian Finance Minister Sidi Ould Tah has been elected president of the African Development Bank, AFDB. This follows a poll during the bank's annual meeting in Ivory Coast. He'll replace Akinwumi Adesina, a Nigerian economist who will step down in September after completing the maximum 2 5-year terms in office. The AFDB, which has $318 billion in capital, is owned by 54 African states and non-regional nations, including the U.S., Japan, and Saudi Arabia. Its biggest shareholder is Nigeria. Millions across the African continent remain excluded from formal finance due to outdated credit assessment tools. Finance exclusion makes individuals and households more vulnerable to economic shocks such as job losses or crop failures, as they cannot access credit or savings to smooth consumption or manage risks. This is according to Steve Munyao, the director and founder at Africa Insights. Munyao was speaking on the sidelines of the second Africa Financial Inclusion Summit and Expo 2025 taking place in South Africa's Johannesburg.
What we have been having across Sub-Saharan Africa, only like 43% of the population has access to formal financial services. So that means the rest don't have access. So they don't have a transaction account. They can't get other services from education, from medical. So financial inclusion, and especially because it targets the underserved, the unbanked. So if you put a kind of initiative in financial inclusion, it has a direct correlation with economic development, especially socio-economic development.
Barrick Mining has asked the Arbitration Tribunal of the World Bank to intervene in legal proceedings in Mali as the miner faces the possibility of the Lolo Gonkoto mine falling under the control of the Mali government. Barrick's move comes as a local court in Mali is expected to rule on the 2nd of June on the government's request to put the Canadian miner's gold miner under a provisional administration. Should the Mali court ruling goes in favor of the government, an individual or an organization will be assigned to take over the mine and reopen it. The South African Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni, says Over 60,000 spaza shops have been registered following a compliance-driven campaign that began late last year. She says she is disappointed by the slow pace at which small businesses are applying for government funding. In March this year, the department launched a massive financial support grant to the tune of $27 million for spaza shops. Dabeni elaborates.
So we have managed to approve funding for 5,000 spaza shops, which has been dispersed. We are looking forward to all others that adhered to the President's call to come and apply. This money is here for spaza shops owned by South Africans to assist you to be compliant with the law, but also assist you to be able to trade. As we said, we are looking forward to spaza shops coming together, forming cooperatives or working as groups in order to participate in that value chain that we're talking in terms of sourcing the products that they are selling in their areas.
U.S. President Donald Trump's global tariffs plan has been temporarily reinstated after a court agreed to pause the ruling, blocking the sweeping trade levels while it considered the White House's appeal. For now, the Trump administration holds power to impose taxes on imported goods until the court decides their validity. BBC's Jake Kwan has more.
It was only last night when the White House was given 10 days to drop its tariffs regime. Mr. Trump's lawyers challenged a ruling mere minutes later, and the U.S. Court of Appeals has paused the lower court's decision. Yesterday's ruling ordered the dismantling of Mr. Trump's tariffs, announced on what he called Liberation Day last month. The case is expected to play out in all levels of the courts across the U.S. Meanwhile, the fight is fueling uncertainty for Mr. Trump's negotiations with world leaders as well as in the markets.
Financial indicators: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 587, Botswana 13 pula 30, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 406, Zambia 26 kwacha 62. BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 67, Russia 78 ruble 61, India 85 rupee 43, China 71.19, South Africa $1 is at 17 rand 86, $1 is 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,298, platinum at $1,079 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil $63.84 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Uzuri na ukubwa wa kazi yako unatokana na nini?
Kwanza kabisa ni kujifunza vitu mbalimbali, lakini pia kuvaa uhalisia wa jamii kile inachopitia, kujifunza vitu vipya, lakini pia kufanya mazoezi na kumshirikisha Mungu katika career yangu ya muziki.
Bila shaka. Je, management na wadhamini vile vile wana nafasi kubwa au wana nafasi gani katika mafanikio yako kikazi?
Niseme labda wana asilimia 99 katika mafanikio ya muziki wangu, management au mabosi wangu.
Umewahi pia kupokea salamu za pongezi au ukosoaji kuhusiana na muziki wako?
Nilishapokea nyingi sana kutoka sehemu mbalimbali, DRC, Tanzania na East Africa nzima kwa jumla.
Tuzungumzie kuhusu ukosoaji sasa. Unisikia pale unapokosolewa?
Najisikia vizuri sana. Unajua, usipokosolewa ina maana wewe sio binadamu wa kawaida, kwa sababu asiyekosolewa pekee ni Mungu.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
All right, it's 7:44 Central African Time, and we're taking a look at some of the stories that have been playing out in the business world. This week has been the African Development Bank's weekly annual meetings, but this year's were particularly important because the new leadership of the bank was announced. And we're going to see a new name coming through, and that's he's from is it Mauritania? Yeah, I think so. South Africa had a candidate that was put through, that was backed by President Ramaphosa, but sadly she didn't make it, which means that for another at least 5 years, because this term is 5 years, and then it is you've got maximum 2 terms. And Adesina finished his 10 years now, and so now we have a new AFD president. We're going to be taking a look at that and other stories shortly. But first, as the week draws to a close, we turn our attention to major movements and developments in African markets, from a new leadership appointment of the African Development Bank to shifting currency trends and key monetary decisions on the continent. And there's plenty to unpack. And we're now joined by Menzi Ndlovu, a political risk analyst, economist rather, from Signal Risk. Menzi, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter. It's a pleasure to be joining you this morning.
So all eyes were on Abidjan and the appointment of a new head of the African Development Bank. How important was this process, and what does it mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We saw the appointment of Sidi Otar as the head of the FDB, replacing Adesina from Nigeria, who has overseen quite an interesting and fairly effective 10 years at the head of the bank. It is often deemed a ceremonial position, but it has grown in importance, as we have seen under the tenure of Adesina, who guided the bank and, in effect, Africa's economic landscape throughout a number of crises, through the Ukraine crisis, through COVID, and more recently through the geopolitical and geoeconomic pressures that have resulted as a result of the developments in the US. So the position has grown in importance. And also, I think, adding to that is the relatively precarious situation that the continent finds itself in, as with respect to its growth outlook, with respect to navigating the uncertainties that are emerging. What is quite confidence-inducing with respect to the new appointment is Sidi Otar's reputation. We know that he has served in a number of key financial positions as well. He has served in the Arab Bank, where he has helped raise the bank's rating to a AAA, and has been key to integral policy decisions there. So there's a lot of confidence that he is the right man at the helm, and we can look forward to another 5 or 10 years of key policy guidance from the bank.
What do you think is the most important thing that the African Development Bank needs to do in the next 5 to 10 years?
Quite interesting. There are a number of headwinds that befall the continent, and it is balancing those headwinds. So it's navigating political uncertainties and geopolitical uncertainties. All right. I think that has become a key mandate, and also overseeing and trying to find a unified economic pathway amongst African economies that are relatively disparaging. We're seeing different movements and different policy outlooks that are coming out of certain regions within West Africa. All right. And that has detracted from the synergy which we had envisaged under the broader African Development Bank mandate. So it's trying to unify those visions. And then also at the same time, trying to steer the continent, as mentioned earlier, through a period of unforeseen uncertainty. All right, trying to steer the continent through geopolitical uncertainty, trying to steer the continent through climate change related factors, trying to steer the continent through more domestic and smaller scale political risks, and also through other disruptions that are emerging as a result of industrial trends. So I wouldn't say there's a specific mandate. It's trying to steer the continent through a plurality of risks, and finding a best fit economic agenda, which is a very, very challenging undertaking.
And then yesterday, the Reserve Bank cutting interest rates by 25 basis points. Good news for those in debt, but not great news for those that have savings.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will say that this cut has been long sought after by the market. I mean, we've been at below the midpoint of the target range since last year, August. So as far back as then, there were murmurs or there were demands from the market for the Reserve Bank to reduce the repo rate. And understandably, there were risks that were influencing its risk aversion. All right, as is well known, there was ensuing trade wars, there was uncertainty over the budget, and the bank was as a result of those risks, it was steered towards taking a more risk-averse direction. But now the focus has turned towards stimulating growth in what is a very sluggish economy. And I think the rate cut demonstrates that the central bank is attuned to this, but there's also a reason to argue that the cut was not deep enough. Inflation is relatively low, real returns are fairly high, and growth is low. So it's time to inject and it's time to fuel some growth into the economy. But we know that the bank is relatively risk averse. That is part of its, mandate and part of why the bank has been held in relatively high esteem. But we hope that this marks the beginning of a cutting cycle, because we really do need to grow the South African economy in the short term.
Menzi, that's where we're going to leave it. Always good talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for your analysis.
Absolutely, sir. Cheers.
Right, thank you. That's Menzi Ndoro, who's a political economist at the Signal Group, talking to us about some of the big events that have been taking place across the continent.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
The president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, Beda, Dr. Sidi Ould Tah, he is vying for the presidency of the African Development Bank, the AFDB. He positions himself as a fervent defender of economic integration and structural transformation on the African continent.
So I do believe that I have a 360 view of the development challenges in the continent, with my experience from both the supply side and the demand side. But more importantly, my vision is to bring on board all the stakeholders and to have a holistic approach for the development of the continent, and to develop partnership across the continent and outside the continent, bringing all the stakeholders together to work for one goal, is to make Africa great for life and livelihood of the African population.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, it's time now to take a look at technological and AI developments and their impact on global markets and transformation therein. We're now joined by Dr. Francois Stoffberg, who's a financial well-being economist at the Efficient Group. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege.
You mentioned in an article that you wrote that the unraveling of the U.S. fiscal dominance and the dollar once unassailable safe haven status. Take us through your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the U.S. is in a peculiar position, and I think time in their history as well. I don't think in the short term, yes, we see a Donald Trump presidency, but there's a longer trend in place. We have analyzed and looked at these various long-term cycles, long-term debt cycles, money creation cycles, long-term risk and political cycles, and these range from anything from 80 to 150 years. And there is a shift in power globally. This is what we saw: Britain coming into power, the US coming into power, and there is some sort of a transitioning happening. It doesn't happen overnight. I think that's just a timing mistake that other analysts have made. It's probably going to take another 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. And like I'm saying, we know that the dollar has been in strength or in power for almost 100, just a little over 100 years. And these currencies tend to be in control, like I said, anything between 100 to 150 years. But there is a clear shift in the attention. There's a call to de-dollarize. There's a call for a BRICS currency. There's a call for the Chinese to step in. There's a call now for the European markets and the euro to once again step in. So I think the dollar is under a little bit of strain. This is a normal occurrence for the shift of power. We saw the Indian economy really rising over the last couple of years, so that's another contender. So we are looking towards something else. We are seeing a shift away from the developed world to the emerging world. That has to do with what's happened to monetary policy over the last 20 years after the great global financial crisis, 2008, 2009. You really saw this rampant expansion in the developed world, and the emerging world was left behind. And there seems to be a shift now, part of these more longer-term cycles towards emerging markets again. It seems to be coinciding what we commonly refer to as the commodity super cycle, which is expected around 2035. So there's a clear shift away from the developed world, and I think I wouldn't call them the biggest losers potentially, the US. I doubt they'll ever be that. I think what the current president there is doing, Trump, he's a cleaning house, which is very good. Very few older, more stifling economies can do that. They're cleaning house, they're cleaning up the bureaucracy, they're trying to clean the pipes and get everything flowing again. And they to a large extent were controlling the development of at least of artificial intelligence, but it's an open source software. And since then, many competitors have stepped in. We know about DeepSeek in China. But the larger part of the great innovations, I would say, in the space of markets, if you want to call it, I wouldn't call myself a scientist and lean towards all the developments across the globe. I mean, driving markets really has been technology, and that technology really has come forth from the US. So they will continue to play a very important role, especially in kind of, I think, as a counterbalance to the East rising. And I think the world has yet to make up their mind who they want them to be led by. A Chinese or an East-led world looks completely different from a West, US, or even Britain, or even when the Netherlands were leading the kind of global development. It was always a Western mindset, a Western way of doing things. So the world hasn't really made up their mind yet how they want to see that play out. But currently there is leaning a lot of support towards the East. But I don't think the US will necessarily give up power that easy. And I think that's also why we're seeing a lot of these proxy wars. Not necessarily in the East like we saw in the early 19th century and 20th centuries. Now it's about the East, the Chinese seas. It's about Taiwan. It's a lot of questions, Hong Kong, a lot of questions being asked there. So I think that the proxy wars are moving away from a physical war like we've seen, although you can maybe argue the Ukraine-Russian war, but if you don't want to make that argument, we're definitely seeing a political war, a shadow war, a market-based war occurring, a trade war occurring as these kind of trade tensions play out.
Let's talk a little bit about AI breakthroughs. You highlight major shifts like Google's new AI mode for its core search engine. How would such developments reshape not only markets but entire business models globally?
Yeah, so I've tried to kind of really go deep into using AI and see everywhere where I can apply it. I saw a clip by Simon Sinek, one of my favorite authors, saying that people are now using their relationships. They are asking Chat or DeepSeek or Grok or even Copilot on Microsoft how to reply to my girlfriend in a conversation or to my husband. And I think that's very interesting. And the big thing there that he was leaning towards is that your girl, she's going to catch you out. And how does that look then? You asking AI kind of to give you this perfect curated answer. And I think that's the depth of what we're seeing AI being applied to. Help me with this. Give me an answer to this. Now, the unfortunate thing, it's what seems to be emerging is that clever people will get more clever because they now have the world's leading support or assistant. With clever people, I mean people educated, people who can ask the right questions, people who can question the response of AI, because it's very
cold and clinical. And then you can weave in kind of what you know to be true, the direction you know to be true, but it's also making more uneducated, more lazy. And that was the same onset that we saw with Google as well. The people who really use Google, because in the past we said that information is power or data is power, or the second best thing is to know where to get the answer. That was going to your library. But too many people were too lazy to go to library. And the same now when we had Google and now we have AI, that too many people are too lazy to use the tools, to go to Google, to ask the answers. And then the people who are more informed, they lean towards that and can extract the full value from something like that. So we're seeing it on a personal level, which I thought was quite profound. We're seeing it definitely on a professional level. Drafting emails now, if you're on Copilot on Outlook, it summarizes everything, gives you an appropriate response, and then you can from there tweak it. So you've just there kind of saves reading all the emails. That's saving you 15 to 20, 25 minutes. Then the initial draft, the layout, that saves you about at least another, I would say, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the depth and the difficulty of the trend of the conversation.
Yeah.
So really doing a lot, which I'm positive about. Yes.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Fascinating. I think
Wonderful.
I'm definitely not going to be asking AI to help me write notes for my wife. She'll catch me out straight away. But thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Wonderful. Have a good day.
Thank you. All right, it's 8 o'clock. It's time for your news with Jwalane Tulongwete.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. There are reports that 10 soldiers have been killed when fighters attacked a military camp in northern Mozambique. The attack was claimed by the Islamic State. A recent increase in militant violence comes as the French energy company Total is trying to resume its operations at a $20 billion gas project. Health officials in Sudan say a cholera outbreak in the capital Khartoum has killed 70 people in 2 days. A surge in infections comes after the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, carried out drone strikes which cut off electricity and water supplies across much of the city. Cholera outbreaks have become worse and more frequent since the war began over 2 years ago. Police Commissioner in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, says that police have arrested 2 suspects that were with Philangeni Nkosi Makhanya, who was the main suspect in the murder of Olorato Mongale. Mongale's body was discovered on Sunday in Lombardy in the north of Johannesburg about 2 hours after she was reported missing, having gone on a date. The 2 suspects who were arrested were not part of the initial murder case. They were arrested for aiding and abetting Makhanya by transporting him around the Amamzimtoti area in KwaZulu-Natal. Makhanya died during a shootout with police in the early hours of the morning. Makhanya's parents were also taken in for questioning on the matter after his mother allegedly tipped off that police were looking for him. Mkhwanazi briefed the media outside a flat where Makhanya was cornered and shot by police.
The team has been tracing from Johannesburg, working with KZN, following up the information. The vehicle was located in one of the townships, the Penel Beta shop, and the vehicle was traced to be belonging to an owner at Kwamashu Township, and we arrived there and the boy was not there. The father confirmed that his son was using the vehicle. The son is the one that has been on the public space about being involved in the murder of that girl. We then be able to pick up the vehicle that picked him up yesterday morning, and we followed that vehicle until we located the car. From there, we were able to then trace all the movements of that vehicle, where it dropped off, was traveling with them. So we do have the suspect driving the vehicle. We have the accomplice that was also with him.
Meanwhile, South Africa's Justice Minister Mamoloko Kubai says her department is committed to reviewing the country's parole laws as well as the Criminal Procedure Act. This after police revealed that 2 of the 3 suspects wanted in connection with the murder of Mongale had been out on bail. Kubai says the Justice Department is working on ways to protect society without violating the rights of the accused.
As the Justice Cluster, we have agreed that we are going to review our processes. We are going to look at where the gaps are. Today, fortunately, we had a justice cluster meeting, what we call JCPS. One of the items was to look at the parole. How far are we in terms of reviewing the parole and also the Criminal Procedure Act that we are responsible for? So both the Department of Correctional Services and Department of Justice having to review that. There are interim measures that the minister has committed that is going to put in place to assist in terms of responding to this, where there's high crimes.
The UN's top official responsible for humanitarian aid has said the people of Gaza are being subjected to forced starvation by Israel. Tom Fletcher again called on the international community to prevent genocide in Gaza. He also denied Israel's allegations that much of the aid sent into Gaza had been stolen by Hamas. He said some supplies were taken, but most of the aid had gotten through. Fletcher told the BBC the world has a responsibility to take greater action to get aid into Gaza.
I think that history will be tough in the way it judges us, and it must be. I think that a lot of what we've been seeing has been telegraphed. It's been announced in advance. We can't say we didn't know what was happening. And all I'm asking is for the international community to be able to say, tell them we did what we could.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headlines, World Football's governing body has banned Zimbabwe football giant Dynamos due to an outstanding fines. And Novak Djokovic has advanced to the next round of the ongoing Roland Garros. I will be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel Africa.
Okay.
Adivinha só, a Channel Africa quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel Africa está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Ahoy, matey.
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertain. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
8:08 Central African Time. Let's go to ECOWAS now. The Economic Community of West African States faces growing threats of terrorism, climate change, military coups, and poverty. Jihadist violence has surged this year in Nigeria and the Sahel region, including Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Leaders and representatives from ECOWAS are meeting in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. This meeting aims to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the regional body that was established on the 28th of May in 1975 rather, with 16 members. So this morning, we dissect the significance of ECOWAS, and we're joined by Bukola Idowu, a journalist and executive director for Kimpac Development Initiative, and also Douglas Ogbankwa, a lawyer and policy analyst. They're both joining us from Nigeria. Bukola and Douglas, thank you so much for joining us. How are you guys this Friday?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Morning, Africa.
Thank
you. Good to be here.
Great. Thanks. Let me start with you, Bukola. 16 countries, which have now become 12, gathered to drive regional integration and free trade, free movement in the West African sub-region. How far have efforts come through the years in terms of advancements when it comes to ECOWAS?
I think the ECOWAS have come, they've done so well in some areas, and when you look at the past 50 years, there are significant achievements you can actually count and say, look, they have done in terms of, and just to name few, when you look at the regional integration in terms of the free movement and achieving that is a great feat. Don't forget some other blocks across the world or continent have not been, even in Africa, have not been able to achieve that. And then you look at in terms of the effectiveness of the peacekeeping over the years they have been able to do. You recollect the issue of ECOMOG and the rest. Then the issue of the free trade and is also one of the key things they have done. Of course, they have their challenges, and like you rightly said in your introduction, 16 have become 12, and it's a major challenge, and there are issues they have to deal with. But as it is now, what some of the things they have been able to achieve within that 50 years has also been something that should be commended. Don't forget, ECOWAS in 50 years have also been able to establish ECOWAS courts. They also have the West Africa Health Organization and some other areas. Even the biometrics alone that allow for free movement of person. And you also are aware in terms of what they are doing when it comes to economic integration. They are already looking at, and which they have even started the West Africa gas pipeline. And so some of these things are there. However, have challenges of low trade among the countries and some other things. But if you ask me in terms of what they have been able to do, they have been able to achieve some of these, and I think these are some of the things they should build on and also look at those challenges they have been facing over the years, or in the recent year rather.
Douglas, let me bring you in here. Bukola cites a few achievements in terms of, as the time we commemorate 50 years of ECOWAS. However, there have been challenges. He also speaks on that. The one I want to ask you on is the withdrawal of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They went on to form their own alliance of Sahel region states. How's this impacted the integrating body as far as credibility and progress in other parts of trade matters?
The withdrawal of those three countries, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, has been a big blow towards providing a common economic corridor for West African states. As you would recall, in January 2001, Mauritania withdrew from ECOWAS, and their major reason being that they don't want to be part of a common economic corridor. However, you realize that the withdrawal of those three countries are predicated on, would I say, ideological alliances with Russia, as opposed to one or two other international powers. That has thrown a big blow on ECOWAS. You realize that ECOWAS is doing a lot of international, transnational highways, like you have the Abidjan-Lagos highway, and there's the Nouakchott-Bamako highway for now. So that would also affect the West African pipeline project that my friend brother has talked about now. And it would also affect the efficacy of the Common Economic Corridor. The ECOWAS attempt to have a common currency, which they intend to call the ECO, and in realization of that objective, they have the West African Monetary Institute, WAMI, which is in Accra, Ghana. That would affect, the ability to be able to have a common currency among African countries. And despite that, I think ECOWAS have really tried in ensuring economic integration, free movement of goods and persons. And you have like SADC, South African Development Commission. They have not been able to have such economic cooperation and economic integration the way ECOWAS has.
Oh, let's talk about the e-passport. Bukola, let me come to you now. In terms of this, the common passport for ECOWAS citizens, as it speaks to borderless diplomacy, can we say that it is no longer a concept now, this a term of borderless diplomacy, but a realization?
Yeah, it's no longer a concept. The realization that is there now is operational. Of course, for there are citizens, everybody. I mean, you carry ECOWAS passports and then you move within the region easily. And I remember the last time I traveled, and that's just recently. I traveled with the ECOWAS document, which I was able to move around, and that is, I mean, what. Mr. Douglas was saying, look, when it comes to that free movement and in terms of that passport, and that has been very effective. We have seen that. The only difference is that we don't know how effective the harmonization of the data is, or if this is already harmonized across all the country in terms of the data, in terms of the issue. But however, the document is there. You can travel with it within the ECOWAS region and without any hindrances, and which I think is a good thing, which they have been able to do.
If you've just joined us on Africa Rise and Shine, we are in conversation with Bukola Ndoro, who is a journalist and executive director for Kimpact Development Initiative, and also Douglas Obankwa, a lawyer and policy analyst. They're talking about ECOWAS, that's the Economic Community of West African States, who are meeting in Lagos, in Nigeria's commercial capital, celebrating or commemorating 50 years of existence and looking into the achievements and some challenges and a way forward to dealing with those. Coming back to you, Douglas, in terms of your article, let's talk about the same issue of the e-passport feeding into the dreams of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. You've cited various or varying experiences at border posts on the African continent where you assessed racist and xenophobic incidences. Please elaborate on this and how these experiences may negatively interfere with this full realization of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Thank you very much. As you are aware, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, being a brainchild of the African Union, was signed by the three African countries to ensure seamless trade among them. However, it has been observed in breach because unlike the successes we have recorded in ECOWAS, the African Union has, like I stated in my article, been like a toothless bulldog. You would realize that if I need to go from here to South Africa by road, I would need nothing less than 23 or 24 passports. And that is something that we need to reason about. If you say you want free trade, then we have to have what I want to call borderless diplomacy. And the only way that can be achieved, African country, of, restrict some kind of persons from coming into your country. However, when it comes to Africans who have legitimate business to do, you have no business applying for a visa. And I said that the concept of a visa is an imperial policy brought in by the imperialists to control Africans from even assessing themselves. Before the coming of the imperialists, Africans traded. You had people from the Buntu tribe and the Zulu tribe of South Africa trading all the way to Buntu in Mali. People from the Swahili tribe in Kenya and Uganda coming all the way through the Sahara to Tripoli, Niamey, and into Nigeria from the north, Kano. So the issue of visas, Africans should open their eyes. It's actually an imperialist tendency, because among the imperialists, they are visa-free. If you want to go from Canada to the United States, if you're a Canadian, you don't need a visa. So why would I want to go and see my brother in South Africa, and you will say, I want a visa? And about some African leaders have actually not helped in ensuring that there is some kind of integration among Africans. I gave you the examples of the Tunisian president who stated that whenever you see any black African in Tunisia, he should be killed. And I then, as the director of strategic communications of the African Bar Association, on behalf of the African Bar, issued a statement condemning the action of the president of Tunisia, which I think was not just xenophobic, was even genocidal. And the African Union did not even utter a word. So these are some of the issues we are talking about. We need to walk the talk with our so-called regional bodies, because some of them are actually just paperweights.
And different countries are guided by different laws. We've seen in certain areas where there's even acts of activism from neighboring countries into a certain country where leaders will say, please don't interfere with the way we do things over here. But as much as there are international standards that need to be adhered to, the role and influence of border police and how that can made to, or their role needs to advance or progress to ensure that ECOWAS countries are sort of speaking with one voice as far as that can happen. Douglas, how do we achieve that?
That's a very brilliant question. You see, security is an important element in international development, and integration comes with so attendant consequences. One of the negative outcomes of integration is that there could be inflow of transnational crimes. In this regard, it is important that ECOWAS does not just, as an institution, concentrate on economic integration, but also, in security integration. In this regard, it is important for ECOWAS to have a joint border patrol along their corridors, their border corridors, to ensure that we do not have people using integration as a license to bring about terrorism. The crisis in Libya, as you know, had created another issue with some terrorists from the Arab world infiltrating the various authorities, because Libya has various authorities that run Libya. And from there, they are able to launch various cells, terrorist cells, into different African countries. So it is important that the leaders of ECOWAS, and in this regard, even all African leaders, find a common ground in sharing intelligence. One of the reasons you see that the Western world are far and above we Africans is that they share intelligence. You will see an American intelligence agency calling a British intelligence agency, they call themselves cousins. But in Africa here, what we have is that our intelligence services, we operate at cross purposes. There seems to be this, pristine nature of us trying to think, we are trying to outdo each other. At the end of the day, we must realize that all Africans, and that the artificial border created is actually a creation of imperialists to make us seem as if we are divided. But in the real sense, we are one, as we hold our ancestry. to one source.
Let me come to you, Bukola. When we talk of a single currency, the ECO, what would be needed to ensure its successful implementation, first of all, and then the continental and even global means of exchange are achieved?
So, I think number one thing we have to first of all look at, and I will take it as a foundational conversation from what he said, and that is the political will, even of the leaders themselves. They have to, because this has been a concept for a long time, and you keep wondering. Now, you have been able to achieve free movement within the sub-region, ECOWAS sub-region, and you have been able to even achieve this issue of free trade. Then why are we having this delay when it comes to a single currency? And then I think everybody must come together and have that political will to be able to execute this. Now, don't forget that this is not only an issue within the West Africa sub-region. So you are even talking about it. I mean, I'm very happy when you make reference to the entire African Union, where we are even having an issue when we, in terms of trade among ourselves. If what's that trade alone is not even an issue for me. I mean, sometimes ago, I went to Zimbabwe, and at some point I went to Kenya, and I have to first of all travel to Europe to come to Africa and then to come to Nigeria. You can imagine. So where they pick you from Kenya or Ethiopia, and some instances they take you to Qatar, and then before you come, and then it's very, very difficult. We have a lot of borders we are put in, as an impediment to our growth. Now, when you look at the statistics, and again, one of the things you need to look at is that what is the percentage of the trade among the West African Union? The data is still saying is less than 20% among ourselves. And so until we now begin, even most especially in the West African country. And I think one of the reasons that is causing this is that, look, how do we encourage trade among ourselves first? And if that percentage is increased, so for instance, when you have close to, if you begin to jack it up to like about 40% trade within the West African region, then I think the issue of the single currency will have much traction. But as it is, we need a political will. We need to increase trade among ourselves. And don't forget, so when Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, when they step out of this Sahel, this ECOWAS, when they step out, one of the things they started talking about is imposing tariff, and that have not been there. And again, that tariff be very, very effective, because you also need to look at the volume of trade that goes into Burkina Faso or that goes into Mali within the West African region. And this is one area. So you need to look at, when you go to EU, for instance, the volume of trade within the EU community alone, in terms of power, in terms of gas, in terms of energy, is massive. In terms of tourism, is massive. So the euro currency become very, very effective. And then you come into the America, you look at the Canadian dollar, the American dollar, and because there has been a huge amount of trade. And that is why when President Trump was talking about is going to impose tariff, and then look, there is a reciprocal tariff also. I said we are going to also impose tariff because the volume of trade is high. Now, when the volume of trade is high, it will encourage it will be easy when it comes to the issue of single currency, is that the leaders of ECOWAS have to first of all look at that political way to achieve this, and then we have to encourage trade among ourselves. We still have an African West African countries or African countries that decide they prefer to trade with Russia and than to trade with their neighbor next door.
And those imports, the tit-for-tat imposition
cost of
these duties imposed, it causes tension. So in the case of ECOWAS and the Sahel region states, or alliance of Sahel states, do you think those tensions caused because of those import duties imposed might subside, might be alleviated?
Well, I think partly. That is one. But the most important thing again is that, see, when these people pull out of ECOWAS, and I think the foundational issue has been there. And one of the things which the ECOWAS should not have allowed to happen is that these people should not have been allowed to form an alliance and then begin to look into Russia or look into other country as probably either protector, and forming an alliance with them, either economic or security-wise, because that mediation should have been done to even avert that. The first response of ECOWAS to this was initially supposed to be military response to their brothers, and I think which was not the first thing to do. You see, the perception of the people also have an issue. The perception of the citizens.
Let me interject there, Bukola, because I just want to ask the final question to Douglas. The ECOWAS Court of Justice, how independent is it really, Douglas, in dealing with West African people's rights? And can we depend on it to continue in its plight?
The ECOWAS Court of Justice has actually done a whole lot in the defense of the people's rights of West Africans. However, the problem that we have is the enforcement of the judgments. You know that members of ECOWAS are signatories to the protocol establishing the ECOWAS Court of Justice. The justices of the court, which is located in Abuja, Nigeria, have, however, been very, very effective in ensuring that people's rights are defended as enshrined in the various constitutions of member countries and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which was signed by African countries. The problem we have, however, is that member states do not cooperate in the execution of the judgments. There are some cases where member states actually concede to settlement of the issues by either stopping the human rights abuses or ensuring that it compensates the victim.
In some aspects, it is something we can depend on to continue in the plight of West Africans. We don't have much time. We actually are completely out of time, and I'm sorry to interject on both between you guys. But gentlemen, thank you so much again for joining us on Africa Rise and Shine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, Aluta continua, I guess, for ECOWAS as we celebrate or commemorate 50 years of the Economic Community of West African States. Completely out of time there, but we were joined by Bukola Ndoro, who is a journalist and executive director at Kimpact Development Initiative, and Douglas Ogbankwa, a lawyer and policy analyst who's written on this issue. So maybe you can find that online and read further, since we didn't have much time to discuss. 31 minutes past 8 Central African. Let's say good morning to Jwalani Tulongwepe, who's got our news headlines.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the Democratic Republic of Congo's former President Joseph Kabila has held a meeting with religious leaders in Goma, marking his first public appearance since arriving in the city a few months away. There are reports that 10 soldiers have been killed when fighters attacked a military camp in northern Mozambique. The attack was claimed by the Islamic State. And finally, the French government has announced a ban on smoking in all outdoor places that can be accessed by children. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
It's yes, time for sports. Yes, Vicky Lelingwati. Good morning again.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. We start off with football news. Zimbabwe football giants Dynamos has been hit with a FIFA ban due to an outstanding amount of $18,500 owed to two former players from Ghana, Emmanuel Paga and Ansa Bochwe. According to reports, Dynamos owes Paga $8,500 while Bochwe is owed $10,000. The duo parted ways with Dynamos in December last year, with Paga joining Mudare-based outfits Manika Dynamos and as Bochwe crossed to Scotland FC. Dembare had a turbulent 2024 season campaign with players boycotting training several times in protest over unpaid winning bonuses and signing on fees. This then led to a mass players' exodus at the end of the season as 15 senior players left. Dynamos has become the fourth Zimbabwean club to be slapped with a FIFA ban since last year. Bafana Bafana coach Hugo Broos has named his final 23-man squad for next month 2 international friendly matches against Tanzania in Limpopo and Mozambique in Polokwane and Pretoria. The Belgian says his highlight since being appointed to the position was a team success at the 2024 Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Ivory Coast, where Bafana won a bronze medal. Broos says he will use the 2 friendlies to give youngsters an opportunity to show if they are ready to make the step up to the senior national team, with an eye on the future as most of the regulars in his squad are nearing retirement age.
It's a very good opportunity now. It's not really a game qualify for World Cup or qualify for AFCON. If you lose that game, it's a disaster. So now, if we lose even those 2 games, we will not be happy because we want to win it. But what's the problem? So they have the opportunity to play. And there are guys from 19, from 20 years old. Maybe they are not ready. But that we will see in those games, and therefore those games are so good for them, that they can show it without pressure.
None of the Mamelodi Sundowns players have been included because the team will participate in the FIFA Club World Cup in the United States from the 14th of June. Broos says Tanzania and Mozambique will provide sufficient opposition. He didn't want to play a stronger team such as Morocco because most of these regulars weren't available.
Playing against top teams, you have to do it with your best team. And not with, like now, all the players of Sundowns are not there. You have a lot of young players in. We had a call from Morocco to play against Morocco. Immediately I said no, because I don't want to have a game like France. And nobody understands if you play against Morocco and you have a big defeat. Everybody is angry.
Let's end with tennis news. Serbian Novak Djokovic's quest for a record-extending 25th Grand Slam title continued at the French Open with victory over Corentin Moutet. Djokovic maintained his perfect record against Frenchmen at Roland Garros, beating home hopeful Corentin Moutet to reach the 3rd round of the French Open. The Serbian kept his dream of a record-extending 25th Grand Slam title alive with a thrilling 6-3, 6-2, 7-6 and 7-1 tie victory in a match that lasted over 3 hours. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, File Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Celebrate unity, progress, and pride with Channel Africa this Africa Month.
Nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home.
Listen in on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and Satellite Channel PAS 10.
It's time for a final look at business news right here on Rise and Shine. Good morning once again. Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Afreximbank has signaled that Ghana has kept up loan repayments to it, potentially setting Accra on a collision course with its other lenders that have already agreed to take losses to help the country recover from default. The African lender told investors that Ghana and Malawi are up to date with their loan facilities, suggesting neither country had run up arrears. While Ghana's restructuring of $13 billion worth of international bonds and debts to official creditors concluded last year, it must also restructure its commercial debt before it can fully emerge from default. Barrick Mining has asked the Arbitration Tribunal of the World Bank to intervene in legal proceedings in Mali as the miner faces the possibility of the Lolo Gonkoto mine falling under the control of the Mali government. Barrick's move comes as a local court in Mali is expected to rule on the 2nd of June on the government's request to put the Canadian miners' gold mine under a provisional administration. Should the Mali court ruling goes in favor of the government, an individual or an organization will be assigned to take over the mine and reopen it. The South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says a lower inflation target will offer relief to indebted consumers by lowering their repayments on loans, while also supporting economic growth and job creation. Kganyago says a lower inflation target will bring about structurally lower interest rates and keep them fixed at a lower level. The governor emphasized that while work to introduce a low inflation target remains underway, the Reserve Bank will make its recommendation to the finance minister once it has decided on an appropriate target rate.
And what the scenario shows is that you actually end up with higher growth over the forecast horizon. And higher growth will benefit the entire economy, but a growing economy should also be an economy that creates jobs, which means that we would be making progress.
The South African Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni, says over 60,000 spaza shops have been registered following the compliance-driven campaign that began late last year. She says she is disappointed by the slow pace at which small businesses are applying for government funding. In March this year, the department launched a massive financial support grant to the tune of $27 million for spaza shops. Ndabeni elaborates.
So we have managed to approve funding for 5,000 spaza shops, which has been dispersed. We're looking forward to all others that adhered to the President's call to come and apply. This money is here for spaza shops owned by South Africans to assist you to be compliant with the law, but also assist you to be able to trade. As we said, we are looking forward to spaza shops coming together, forming cooperatives or working as groups in order to participate in that value chain that we're talking in terms of sourcing the products that they are selling in their areas.
U.S. President Donald Trump's global tariffs plan has been temporarily reinstated after a court agreed to pause the ruling blocking the sweeping trade levels while it considered the White House's appeal. For now, the Trump administration holds power to impose taxes on imported goods until the court decides their validity. The BBC's Jake Kwon has more.
It was only last night when the White House was given 10 days to drop its tariffs regime. Mr. Trump's lawyers challenged a ruling mere minutes later, and the U.S. Court of Appeals has paused the lower court's decision. Yesterday's ruling ordered the dismantling of Mr. Trump's tariffs, announced on what he called Liberation Day last month. The case is expected to play out in all levels of the courts across the U.S. Meanwhile, the fight is fueling uncertainty for Mr. Trump's negotiations with world leaders as well as in the markets.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira, 587 in Botswana, 13 pula, 30. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling, 406. Zambia, 26 kwacha, 62. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 67. In Russia, 78 ruble 61. India, 5 rupee 43, China 7 yuan 19, South Africa 17 rand 86 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Gold is at $3,298, platinum at $1,071 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $63.95 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
All right, let's come back to the country where we are broadcasting live from now, South Africa. The families whose loved ones died in the Life Esidimeni tragedy in the Gauteng province of our country say their closure will come after seeing those responsible for their deaths being prosecuted. In 2016, 144 mental health patients died after they were transferred from a registered Life Esidimeni hospital to a non-registered and unlicensed non-governmental organization. Last year, the Pretoria High Court ruled that the former MEC, Qedani Mahlangu, and head of mental health, Dr. Makabo Manamela, can be held criminally liable for those or for some of the deaths. Sisi Sekhalo has more on this story.
It's almost a decade since what has come to be known as the Gauteng Mental Health Marathon Project, where over 1,000 patients were transferred from Life Esidimeni Hospital to under-resourced, unlicensed and unregistered non-governmental organizations. At the time, the families and civil society organizations tried to stop the transfers, but their calls fell on deaf ears. As a result, 144 patients died in the hands of the NGOs. The deaths, which has been put at the doors of the health department in South Africa's Gauteng province. The families went through several processes, including the investigation by the Health Ombudsman and arbitration. Last year, Judge Mwanwa Tefo of the Pretoria High Court ruled that the then MEC Qedani Mahlangu and mental health head Dr. Makabo Manamela can be held liable for at least 8 deaths following an inquest. However, the ball is now in the hands of the National Prosecuting Authority (NPA) to prosecute or not. And since the court ruling, the NPA has not made a decision. The spokesperson for the affected families, Christine Ngumalo, says they need to see justice.
We can't get the closure we need, and I think what makes it even more, or what makes us angry, is the manner in which they died. When somebody dies so tragically, you don't get over something. Unlike somebody who was sick and something, at least you know what the process was. But the manner in which our loved ones died, it just, every time you think about it, you're just angered. You feel all sorts of emotions, really.
She says government has failed the families and that they have been more than patient.
Right from the onset, we asked the NPA to come on board to do an inquest, and they flat out refused. Right from the onset. It's not like we are coming now to the NPA. Right from the onset, when we couldn't find the bodies of our loved ones, when we couldn't trace, how they died, when we didn't know what was going on, we said to the NPA, "There's a case here. Please help us. If you get involved, we'll get to this." They refused. It's now what 9 years later, we are still at that very point where they are still deciding whether they should or shouldn't. For me, I think I've said it before, that every time there's an element of something political, the NPA does not know how to react. They forget the codes by which they are supposed to do their work by. Because this is political, and that is why it is taking this long. Had it been perhaps a private citizen or somebody, a private company, the chances are they would have moved swiftly.
Section 27 represents the social and economic rights of individuals and has been at the forefront of helping the families to go through the ordeal. The executive director at the organization, Sasha Stevenson, says the National Prosecuting Authority needs to set a precedent.
We need a decision and we need a prosecution. This is such an important case, and there's a real need for accountability for the deaths of the mental health care users and for health system failures that kill people. I think it's also an important opportunity for the NPA to demonstrate that those in high-level positions can't get away with acting recklessly with other people's lives. That's an important accountability message to send in a constitutional democracy. And so we really hope that the NPA does make this decision to prosecute, and it does so quickly so that the families of the people who died in the Life Esidimeni disaster will start to see the justice that they so desperately want.
Meanwhile, the NPA could not be reached for comment. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Oh, yeah.
South Africa's Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, Beda has paid tribute to the enduring legacy of activist Elijah Barai, highlighting the pivotal role of the Youth League generation in shaping the struggle against apartheid. Speaking at the second Elijah Barai Memorial Lecture hosted by the Department of Employment and Labour in collaboration with the University of Johannesburg, or UJ, Mantashe emphasized how their commitment to worker rights, equality and freedom fueled a bold program of action that was adopted by the ANC in 1949, a program that boldly defied apartheid laws and helped the world recognize apartheid as a crime against humanity. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe has more.
Elijah Barai was an iconic South African hero in the fight for justice, equality and democracy. He devoted his life to promoting worker rights and bringing about the end of apartheid in South Africa. His rise from a humble beginning, a prominent leader in the labor movement and anti-apartheid activism, his role in shaping South Africa's history and his enduring impact on the fight for social justice are an uplifting story that exemplifies the resilience of the human spirit. South Africa's Petroleum and Mineral Resources Minister Beda has described Elijah Barai as a selfless leader.
The behavior of a professional in society determines the attitude of society towards that profession. It is this background that makes Barai to be committed in fighting for worker rights, equality and freedom for all. He loved freedom, not for himself, but for all.
In the 1940s, Barai joined the African National Congress Party youth movement, contributing immensely to the ANC's plan of action.
1944 to 1994 is 5 decades. It is that generation of youth leaguers that Barai belonged to. It is that early involvement in the youth league that developed him into an activist. Barai belonged to a youth league generation that appreciated that leadership is about ability to generate ideas. That's why that generation generated the program of action.
Mantashe attested that through this type of activism, it led to a pronouncement that apartheid is a criminal offense.
It was an evil against humanity. It was not the theory that we wrote it and we said it. It was because actively wanted to prove it. That program of action was defiance of apartheid laws.
South Africa's Minister of Employment and Labour, Nomakosazana Meth, described Barai, a figure that was cognitive of human and birthrights.
We remember Elijah Barai today not just as the first president of COSATU, but as a visionary leader who understood that labor rights are human rights. He began his activism in the 1940s with the ANC Youth League, and he went on to become a founding member of the NUM in 1982. His life was shaped by a dear understanding that the struggle for fair wages, safe working conditions, and union rights could not be separated from the broader fight against apartheid and for human dignity.
Representing the workers, South Africa's largest labor movement, Congress of the South African Union, COSATU, First Deputy President Mike Shingange said Barai had unshakable spirit, resistance to any system.
From his early days in the ANC Youth League to his daring activism with Umkhonto weSizwe, and from the presence of the apartheid state to the brutal gold mines, Comrade Barai carried within him a flame that no system of oppression could extinguish.
Barai's family has expressed their appreciation to the government of South Africa and the University of Johannesburg for initiating this memorial lecture, taking place for the second time to becoming an annual event. Channel Africa spoke with Lizek Hassan and Sandile Mtini, both daughters to Barai.
We are honored and grateful to have this second memorial lecture as a family. We are so proud of him, and we are so proud of his legacy that he left for us as Barai family.
First of all, I really appreciate the initiative done by the Department of Labour and UJ in terms of carrying on the legacy of Barai. He fought for the liberation and the struggle of mine workers. How I wish organized labor in various institutions could do the same in the government of today.
In giving her vote of thanks, Professor Fiona Tregena from the South African Research Chair in Industrial Development at University of Johannesburg emphasized on how critical are these events and also taking the legacy beyond the archives.
So it's important to recognize the contributions of organized labor, of the organized working class to the democracy that we enjoy today. And that's really Minister Metha, in partnership with the department, I think the impetus behind this lecture, to recognize that contribution to those rights that we take for granted. It's easy to take rights for granted when you're enjoying them on a daily basis, but those rights were struggled for by the likes of Elijah Bahai, and a contribution that goes far beyond the workplace to the broader society. And this lecture series isn't just about putting that legacy in a historical museum and admiring it from a distance, but about that as a living legacy.
Elijah Bahai's life demised in 1994, his efforts reminds us that the struggle for justice, freedom and equality is an ongoing journey that requires dedication, sacrifice and unwavering resolve. Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
South Africa's Gauteng Province Premier Panyaza Lesufi has emphasized the urgent need to decolonize all aspects of South African education to legal systems. Speaking at the G20 Interfaith Forum, IF20 in Pretoria, Lesufi addressed the critical role of faith-based movements in confronting Africa's colonial legacy. The forum, organized by the IF20 Local Organizing Committee in partnership with the Kara Heritage Institute and the South African Interfaith Council, centered on tackling the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment and inequality. Michael Mbewe picks up the story.
The G20 Interfaith Forum builds on the vital roles that religious institutions and beliefs play in world affairs, reflecting their rich diversity of institutions, ideas and values. These include interfaith and intercultural organizations, religious leaders, scholars, development and humanitarian entities, business and civil society actors. This time, the message is clear: decolonize Africa. Speaking as a guest speaker, Lesufi highlighted the lingering impact of apartheid-era systems, condemning the continued exclusion.
If we have to speak of decolonization, it means everything we do must be all-encompassing and include and accommodate everyone that wants to be part of that world, because we are better together and we are better if we share the same ideas. The good thing is that the apartheid system has shown us the bad side of human beings. The apartheid system has shown us the bad side of legislation. The apartheid system has shown us the bad side of culture, and the apartheid system has shown us the bad culture of education system. And therefore, if we speak about decolonizing ourselves from those, it means we must be all-encompassing and no one must be excluded.
As part of redress, Lesufi strongly endorsed the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, calling for its uncompromised implementation to ensure that every child, regardless of origin or circumstance, has equal access to education.
That is why some of us are very firm that the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, the Bela Act, must not be a compromise, but must be implemented. There must be no child that is left out of school because they are speaking a wrong language in their own communities. There must be no child that is denied access to education purely because the education of the rich is better than the education of the poor. Education must be equal for everyone, regardless of their background, because that's the beginning of decolonization and that's the beginning of improvement.
All right, coming up next from Africa, Rise and Shine on Channel Africa is On the Move, and Benjamin is here to tell us what to expect on this Friday, the 30th of May. Good morning.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
You guys are good. Yeah, no, we're going to be looking at something very interesting. We're going to be looking at the end of Movango.
Oh, a lot of things are ending, hey?
Geez, that's like 30 years or something.
Yeah,
so that's
like
a South African soapy
years. Yeah,
that's on television.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, we're going to just look at what's happening there, just reflect on those years. But most importantly, there's some new talent that's coming in the last season. So that's also like a double-edged sword, you know.
Why are they bringing in new people and then gonna leave them unemployed?
Is that how it is?
You're saying it's the last one, they're ending it?
Yeah, it is.
No, this industry, hey?
No comment on that final statement you just made.
Wow. Are there any cast members from the original that are still in?
I don't know. I mean, Glenn Lewis, maybe, would he make a comeback? Remember the DJ Glenn Lewis was on the first one?
So young in there. Back in the day. Wow.
And that's a legendary South African soapy, and the fact that it's on an indigenous language.
Yeah.
An indigenous language that feels marginalized on TV.
Exactly. Yeah. So for that to be coming to an end,
it's going to be interesting. So that's what we're going to be chatting about amongst all the other creative conversations we're going to have.
Okay. Well, we
And what are the plans for the weekend for you? I know when it's Friday.
No, I'm resting.
Are you sure?
Yeah, spending time with my son.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
Nice.
That's sweet.
So on Friday, you normally have a music session as well.
Yeah, we do. It's coming up. All of it is coming up.
Who do you have today?
We've got a DJ from Nigeria, so that's going to be fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Nigerian music's really, its influence is being felt all over the place now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's becoming like this dominating theme, right? Yeah. So we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be cool.
Nice. You must
I'm thinking
enjoy
of
the show.
AKA, what was that song?
Fela Versace.
I'm sure that's the only AKA song.
Okay, moving right along.
Moving right along, we're going to leave you guys in the very capable hands of Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tau. But from Asanda, Beda and Peter Ndoro.
Have a great weekend, everybody. The news is next with Jolani Tula and Mwepe.
Bye-bye.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Top stories. Asawa, the DRC's former president Joseph Kabila, holds a meeting with religious leaders in Goma